Wow, it's good to see you today. It really is. I can't tell you how good it is to see you because it's a long weekend and you're here. Wow, that's awesome. And bless your heart for faithfulness. I want to talk to you a little bit about that. I want you to turn in your Bibles to Matthew 25. And in the Pew Bible there, it's page 22 in the New Testament. And so the 25th chapter of Matthew, and Jesus was a master storyteller. He could take a truth and make it very understandable on our level. And so he told what we call parables. And parables were earthly stories that illustrated heavenly truths. And we see one here in Matthew 25, beginning in the 14th verse. Follow along as I read. For just as a man is about to go on, for it is just like a man who's about to go on a journey, who called his own slaves and entrusted his possessions to them. To the one he gave 5 talents. Now the word talent to us today means ability or a gift that you have to do something. But at that time it meant money. And we have taken the word talent from, it actually comes from this, and we've made it what it is in our connotation today. But at this time, it meant an amount of money. So to the one, he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, each according to his ability, and he went on his journey. Immediately, the one who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them and gained 5 more talents. In the same way, in the same manner, the one who had received the 2 talents gained 2 more. But he who had received the 1 talent went away and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. The one who had received the 5 talents came up and brought 5 more talents, saying, Master, you entrusted 5 talents to me. See, I have gained 5 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful slave. You were faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. Also the one who had received 2 talents came up and said, Master, you entrusted 2 talents to me. See, I have gained 2 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful slave. You were faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. And the one who had received 1 talent came up and said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, gathering where you scattered no seed. I was afraid and went away, hid your talent in the ground. See, you have what is yours. But his master answered and said to him, You wicked and lazy slave, you knew that I reap where I did not sow and gather where I scattered no seed. You ought to have put my money in the bank, and on my arrival I would have received my money back with interest. Therefore, take away the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. There's our story, and the Lord is teaching us that when we have things entrusted to us, we are to use them for Him. And they are to be put to use for Him. It is a grievous sin to not use what God has entrusted to you for Him. If you didn't get the outline, hold up your hand, and our ushers will hand you one so you can follow along. While they're doing that, I want to tell you a little story. My grandparents homesteaded on land in Wyoming. And on land just west of Casper, Wyoming, about, they call it Powder River. And somehow my grandfather was killed. We don't know exactly what happened. We think he came back to Omaha on a trip and never returned. And so it was my grandmother with a little baby living in a little wooden shack on that land. And something happened to her, and she ended up in the hospital. And my mother, little child, ended up in an orphanage and grew up in an orphanage for a while, and then was adopted by some people who really adopted her just so they could get the money from the state. They didn't care about her, didn't love her, and were not kind to her. In fact, were very unkind to her for a good number of years and as she grew up. And then when she came to her adolescence years, she, on her own, walked to a church. They had moved to Nebraska, and she walked to a church. They lived in Grand Island, and started attending a church. And just so happened that the pastor and his wife had no children. And they were very kind and very loving. And I remember my mother saying she was just so blown away to the first time in her life hear about Jesus. She had never heard about Jesus. And to learn that Jesus loved her was just amazing to her, because she had never been loved in her life that she could remember. And then not only that Jesus loved her, but the pastor and his wife loved her. And she felt so loved and was just drawn to that. And so the pastor and his wife saw the need there, and they ended up going to a judge and asking that they could have custody of her. And the judge gave them custody of her. And so for her teen years, she grew up in a parsonage, living with a pastor and his wife. And I have a picture of them there. And that's my mother and dad, my dad with a hat on, and my mom. And then that's the pastor and his wife, and the guy he's holding is me. And then Martha and Mary and Marlene in front of him, my three sisters. And so that is Carl and Alma Kinsler. And so you know where I got my name. And so there are adopted grandparents, Carl and Alma Kinsler. They're the ones who took my mother in. And as we grew up here in Lincoln, they moved out to Idaho and pastored churches in the northwest area of the country. And so we didn't see them much because there was such a distance. And I still remember a few times when we did see them. And I do remember every Christmas getting a big box, and that had in that box gifts for each one of us, individually wrapped in a big box, and how excited we kids were. And I remember now and then, Mom let me read Grandma's letters, and what a blessing that was, as she would tell about serving the Lord and how the Lord, was working in their ministry. And then I do remember when they came a few times to visit us, and what an experience it was. They were the most godly people, and I remember when they came, I mean, everybody, once a day, everybody went to their knees in the living room, and we had a time of prayer, And, to hear Grandpa lift your name in prayer was a powerful thing. And I still remember getting up off our knees and Grandma wiping the tears, And then I had the most amazing experience one time with Grandpa. He and I were alone. And he looked me in the eye and asked me point blank about my salvation. Do you know for sure that you have received Jesus Christ, that you know him personally, that heaven is your eternal home? And, and I still to this day, am just amazed that he would care enough, to personally, one-on-one, ask me about that. And I am very confident that they prayed for us many, many times. And when the Lord took Grandpa home, my grandma put his Bible in a box and mailed it to me. And then, I don't know when it was, about 15 years ago or something, my wife and I went to the West Coast to Rick Warren's conference. And on our way back, we went up through the Northwest to Boise, Idaho, to see Grandma. And she was living in a retirement home then, and we visited with her, took her out to eat, and then she wanted us to go by and she wanted to show us her church, and that was her life, her church. And it was just a little church, about the size of our royal room, but she wanted us to see her church. And then we went back to her little room there, and she got out a scrapbook, and we went over pictures, and here was one picture of her Sunday school class back in Grand Island, Nebraska, and I said, "Grandma, that's my mom." And when my mom was just a young teenager, she says, "Oh yes, Alice was in my class, like it was yesterday, no big deal."